The cold morning wind whispered through the iron gates of Blackstone Manor. The mansion stood tall, imposing, and as lifeless as the man who owned it. Its grand marble columns and perfectly trimmed gardens were nothing more than a facade, hiding the dark reality that unfolded behind those heavy oak doors. Inside, footsteps echoed down the marble floors. Small, fragile footsteps. Her name was Emily, only 7 years old, her face pale, her lips dry, and her little hands red from scrubbing floors that never seemed clean enough for her father. Her father, Victor Blackstone, the only heir to one of the largest fortunes in the county, a man whose heart was as cold as the stone that gave his mansion its name. Dressed in his usual flawless navy suit, silk tie perfectly knotted, he stood at the top of the staircase, looking down at the tiny figure holding a bucket in one hand and a rag in the other. Victor's icy voice pierced the air. "Emily!" he called, his tone void of any warmth. "I said I don't want to see a single stain on that floor when I come back. If I do, you know the consequences." The girl nodded weakly, her throat dry, her body trembling. Her fever had returned, the same fever that had left her coughing all night alone under a thin blanket in the servants' quarters. Without waiting for a response, Victor checked his gold watch, adjusted his cufflinks, and disappeared into his office, slamming the door behind him. Tears welled up in Emily's eyes, but she wiped them quickly. Crying only made it worse. As she kneeled down, coughing into her sleeve, a shadow appeared by the window. A pair of intense dark eyes watched her, silent, alert, protective. It was Diesel, the Doberman, Victor's prized guard dog, feared by everyone who worked at the mansion. Strong, fast, intelligent, a beast trained to obey only Victor, or so everyone thought. But there was something different about Diesel. Something that even Victor never noticed. Beneath that fierce posture, there was a heart, and that heart was quietly breaking every time Diesel saw that little girl struggle to breathe, scrubbing floors with trembling hands. From the window, Diesel tilted his head, his ears perked up as if trying to understand why. Why was this small human being treated like this? Why was the laughter, the joy, and the childhood stolen from her? Emily coughed again, hard. Her tiny body shivered as the cold floor sent chills through her bones. She glanced toward the window for a moment, locking eyes with the Doberman. For a brief second, a strange comfort washed over her, as if, somehow, someone saw her, really saw her. "Faster, Emily!" Victor's voice thundered from behind the closed office door. She jumped in fear and went back to scrubbing, ignoring the dizziness clouding her vision. Diesel didn't move. His eyes stayed fixed on her. His instincts, the same instincts that made him a perfect guard dog, were now telling him something else. Something was terribly wrong, and deep within that powerful creature, something stirred. A decision was quietly forming. The day dragged on. The sun climbed higher, but warmth never reached the halls of Blackstone Manor, and neither Emily nor Diesel knew yet that everything was about to change. Forever. The old grandfather clock in the main hall struck 11. Its heavy chimes echoed through the hollow mansion, bouncing off walls decorated with paintings of ancestors who seemed as cold and lifeless as Victor himself. Emily's small hands trembled as she wiped the dust from the tall window frames. Her vision blurred, her fever burning hotter by the hour. Each movement felt heavier, each breath shorter, as if the very air inside the mansion weighed against her chest. From outside, Diesel never left his post by the window. His glossy black coat reflected the sunlight, but his dark eyes stayed focused, sharp and restless. Every time Emily coughed, Diesel's ears flicked forward. His body stiffened, his muscles tensed. He paced back and forth along the garden's edge, something deep in his instincts roaring louder with each passing minute. Through the glass, the Doberman watched as Victor passed through the hallway, barely glancing at Emily. "Still not done?" Victor scoffed, his voice filled with disdain. "Lazy and useless, just like—" He stopped himself. He rarely spoke of her mother, And when he did, it was with the same bitterness that poisoned every word he spat toward Emily. "Finish the dining room," he ordered, "and if I see a single fingerprint on the glass table, you won't eat tonight." The threat was empty of emotion, spoken like a man giving instructions to a broken machine. Not a child, not his daughter. Emily opened her mouth to respond, but instead coughed hard. Her knees buckled for a moment, but she forced herself to stand. "Yes, Father," she whispered, barely audible. Victor didn't even bother to reply. His leather shoes clicked away, disappearing into the west wing of the mansion. From his spot outside, Diesel's breathing grew heavier. His paws scratched at the stone path, as though something primal was building inside him. Something bigger than commands, bigger than training. He wasn't just a guard dog anymore. No, he was something else now. The first drop of rain hit Diesel's snout. A storm was brewing. Clouds gathered fast, heavy and dark, swallowing the last pieces of blue sky. The wind grew colder, twisting through the trees, shaking branches, making the whole mansion seem even more haunted than it already was. Inside, Emily struggled to move the heavy chairs around the massive dining table. Her tiny arms shook. Her fingers ached. Her throat burned. She wiped her sweaty forehead with the sleeve of her worn-out sweater, leaving a faint trail of dust behind. She was starving. Her last meal had been a slice of dry bread the night before, secretly given by Mrs. Agnes, the old cook, when Victor wasn't looking. Even Agnes, despite her fear of losing her job, couldn't turn a blind eye anymore. But fear ruled. Everyone inside those walls, except Diesel. A loud clap of thunder shook the skies. The rain began to pour harder. Diesel's tail stiffened. His sharp ears caught something others couldn't, the weak, ragged breathing of the child inside. The uneven, painful rhythm no one else paid attention to. He growled, low, deep. His eyes narrowed. Then a sound shattered the moment, a loud crash, the sound of glass breaking. Emily had collapsed. Her fragile body hit the dining room floor, knocking over a vase that shattered into 1,000 pieces. For a moment, there was only silence, the heavy, suffocating silence of the mansion. Then Diesel reacted. He let out a sharp, urgent bark, a sound that carried far beyond the gardens. His muscles tightened. His eyes locked onto the front door. He paced back and forth, barking louder now, not a threatening bark, but a desperate one, a cry for help. But would anyone listen? Inside the house, the footsteps of Victor echoed fast, heading toward the noise. Outside, Diesel's instincts flared into something wild, something powerful, because what happens next will change everything. Victor stormed into the dining room, his face twisted in fury. "What have you done now?" he barked, his voice bouncing off the marble walls. Then he saw her, Emily, lying on the floor, motionless, her small frame curled up beside the shattered vase, her skin pale, her lips trembling, her tiny hands clutching her chest as she coughed weakly, fighting to breathe. For a brief second, maybe the first in years, Victor's eyes widened with something almost resembling concern. But that flicker vanished as quickly as it came, swallowed by the cold, bitter pride that had ruled his life for so long. "Get up," he ordered. Emily didn't move. "I said, get up." Victor's voice thundered through the mansion. "Stop pretending." But there was no pretending. Her body simply wouldn't respond. Outside, Diesel barked louder, pacing, growling, his entire body rigid with tension. His instincts screamed. Something was wrong, very wrong. Diesel's barks echoed through the storm, sharp and desperate. Rain pounded against the windows. Thunder roared above. But the Doberman refused to back down, his paws scratched against the front door. His muscles flexed, his breath heavy and fast. Back inside, Victor clenched his fists, his face red with frustration. "You useless little thing," he spat. "Lying there like your pathetic mother." The mention of her mother, a wound Victor rarely opened, was like a dagger. Emily's weak eyes fluttered, barely able to hold back the tears. Not because of the words, but because her body felt like it was sinking, fading, her chest burned, her lungs fought for air that wouldn't come. Suddenly, a soft voice broke through the tension. "Sir, I think she needs help." It was Agnes, the old cook, standing at the doorway. Her hands shook as she wiped them on her apron. Her voice was barely more than a whisper, but it carried the weight of 1,000 silent regrets. Victor turned slowly, his eyes narrowing. "Help." His voice was ice. "No, she's faking it, like her mother always did. This is manipulation." "But sir, her fever. Look at her, she can't breathe." Agnes's voice cracked. Victor marched toward her, towering over the elderly woman. "You work for me, not for that child. And if you want to keep working here, you'll stay out of things that don't concern you." Agnes stepped back, her lips trembling, tears pooling in her eyes. But she didn't speak another word. Fear sealed her mouth. At that moment, Diesel's bark turned into something Victor had never heard before. A howl, a sound not of aggression, but of desperation. A wild, primal cry that pierced through the storm, slicing through the walls, vibrating deep into the bones of anyone who heard it. Victor snapped his head toward the window, his eyes meeting the Doberman's. "What?" Then something unexpected happened. Diesel lunged at the front door. His massive body collided with the heavy wood. Once, twice, again. His paws scratched wildly. His teeth sank into the iron handle. He pulled. He yanked. The hinges groaned under the force. Inside, Victor rushed toward the door, yelling, "Get back, you stupid mutt!" But Diesel didn't care, not anymore. Another crash, another violent pull, and then, with one final thunderous slam, the door burst open. Rain and wind exploded into the hallway. Diesel charged inside, his paws pounding against the marble, leaving muddy prints everywhere. His eyes locked on Emily. He ran straight past Victor, ignoring the man's furious shouts, straight to her, to the little girl lying on the floor, barely breathing. Diesel nudged her with his nose, gently, urgently. He whined. He licked her face. He pressed his head against her chest, as if willing her heart to keep beating. Victor stood frozen, for the first time truly speechless. What is this?" But Diesel wasn't done. The Doberman turned, planting himself firmly between Emily and Victor. His body stiffened, his teeth bared. A deep, guttural growl rumbled from his chest, not of a pet defending its owner, but of a guardian, a protector, a warrior. For the first time, Victor realized, he wasn't in control anymore. For a long, heavy moment, the mansion was filled with nothing but the sound of Diesel's growl. A low, threatening rumble that vibrated through the marble floors, through the glass windows, through Victor's spine. Victor took a step back, not because he was afraid of the dog. At least that's what he told himself. No, it was confusion, shock, disbelief. This wasn't supposed to happen. Diesel was trained, obedient, loyal, expensive, a symbol of his power. And yet right now, that same dog was standing between him and the child he considered nothing more than a burden. Diesel's ears were pinned back. His eyes were locked onto Victor's with an intensity that could have cracked stone. His lips pulled back, exposing sharp, glistening teeth. Every muscle in his body was coiled like a spring, ready to strike. Victor pointed a trembling finger. "Move! Move away from her! Now!" Diesel didn't move. Instead, the Doberman stepped forward, just enough to make a statement. His growl deepened, a sound that no one inside that house had ever heard before. It wasn't anger, it wasn't rage. It was a warning, one last warning. Victor's hands curled into fists. "You're a dog," he spat. "My dog. You belong to me. You obey me." But Diesel didn't obey. Not anymore. Behind him, Emily lay still, her breathing shallow. Her fevered skin was clammy. Her small fingers twitched weakly, reaching toward the warmth of Diesel's fur. Her vision was fading in and out. She couldn't fully understand what was happening, but she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't alone. Not anymore. Diesel was there. Her protector, her friend. Suddenly, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed down the hallway. Agnes appeared again, this time with George, the old groundskeeper. His face was pale, and his hands were trembling, holding a set of tools from the workshop. "Dear Lord," George muttered as he saw the scene, Diesel standing like a soldier over Emily's fragile body, growling at Victor. What's happening here?" he stammered. Agnes pulled at his sleeve. "Call Dr. Harris. Now. She's not going to survive this fever without help." "But Victor," George's voice cracked. "I don't care about Victor." Agnes snapped, her fear suddenly drowned by something stronger. "That child won't survive the night if someone doesn't. Do something." Victor spun around, furious. "No one is calling anyone. Get back to work, both of you. This doesn't concern—" A bark, sharp, explosive. Victor flinched. Diesel had lunged forward half a step, teeth fully bared now, saliva dripping from his jaws. His deep chest vibrated with another terrifying growl. Victor stumbled back. Get that animal out of my house," he roared. "George, do something." George shook his head slowly. His eyes were wide, terrified. "But not of Diesel, of Victor. Not this time, sir," he said, his voice shaky but firm. "Not this time." Victor's eyes bulged. "What did you say?" "I said," George swallowed hard, "not this time." Agnes knelt beside Emily, her hands brushing the wet hair away from the little girl's burning forehead. "Stay with me, sweetheart. Stay awake. You hear me?" Her voice cracked as tears filled her eyes. Emily tried to respond, tried to say something, but only a weak whisper escaped her lips. "Diesel." The Doberman glanced back for a moment. His growl softened just slightly, enough to reassure her, then snapped right back to full strength as Victor shifted. Another bark, louder, sharper. It was a clear message. "Don't move." Victor backed toward the staircase, chest heaving, fist shaking. This is insanity." "I'll call animal control. I'll have that mutt put down." But even as he spoke, he could see it, the resolve in George's face, the fire in Agnes's eyes, and above all, the unmoving, unshakable wall of muscle and loyalty that was Diesel. The storm outside raged on, and in that moment, for the first time in his life, Victor Blackstone realized he was alone. Truly, utterly alone, and his empire of control was beginning to crumble. The storm outside had reached its peak. Rain slammed against the mansion's windows, and wind howled through the trees like distant voices crying out for justice. Inside, the oppressive silence was only broken by Diesel's steady, threatening growl and the ragged breathing of little Emily, whose frail body lay trembling against the cold marble floor. Her skin was burning with fever, and her lips were now turning a frightening shade of pale blue. But even in her delirium, her tiny fingers never stopped reaching toward the Doberman's warm, protective body, as if she knew it was the only shield. Left between her and the merciless world she had been born into, Victor stood frozen at the foot of the staircase. His fists were clenched so tightly, his knuckles turned white, his eyes darting between Diesel, George, and Agnes, as if trying to calculate whether this nightmare could still be brought back under his control. But for the first time in his life, that control was slipping. No, it was being ripped away. His gaze shifted to the old groundskeeper, who now stood taller than Victor had ever seen him stand, gripping the handle of a rusty wrench not as a tool, but as a symbol of defiance. George had spent decades bowing his head, swallowing every cruel word, every impossible demand. But not today. Not when a child's life was on the line. Not when the last shred of his conscience refused to remain silent any longer. Agnes, on her knees beside Emily, worked quickly, her wrinkled hands soaked in sweat as she pressed a cool cloth against the girl's burning forehead. Her voice trembled with both fear and determination as she whispered words of comfort, telling Emily to hold on, that help was coming, even if she didn't know how yet. Her heart raced as she glanced toward the old rotary phone hanging on the wall near the kitchen, a phone Victor had forbidden anyone to use without his permission. For years, Agnes had obeyed that rule. But rules didn't matter anymore. Not now. Diesel shifted his stance, lowering his body protectively over Emily, while keeping his sharp gaze locked onto Victor. The Doberman's growl didn't falter, deep and thunderous, vibrating through the floor like a warning from something far older and far wiser than anyone could understand. His ears twitched at every movement, every breath. His body, trained for defense, now fully committed to something far beyond obedience. This wasn't about commands. This wasn't about being a guard dog anymore. This was loyalty transformed into courage, courage into defiance, defiance into protection. Victor's voice trembled, cracking under the pressure that his pride refused to acknowledge. "George, if you don't control that animal right now, you're fired. Both of you. Out of my property. This is my house, my rules." George didn't flinch. His grip on the wrench tightened, and his weathered eyes, so often downcast in submission, now stared directly into Victor's soul with a look that said more than words ever could. His voice, when it came, was steady, calm, but filled with something Victor wasn't used to hearing: resolve. "No, sir. Not today. Not ever again." Victor blinked in disbelief. What did you just—" I said. George interrupted, his tone like steel. "This ends tonight. The way you've treated this child, your own daughter, it ends. Now." For a brief moment, the only sound was the relentless hammering of rain against the glass, the occasional crack of thunder shaking the walls, and Diesel's growl, steady as a heartbeat. Agnes stood now, moving toward the phone. Her hands trembled as she picked up the receiver, expecting Victor to explode, to lunge, to rip it from her hands. But Diesel's stance tightened, his paws braced, his body tense. A single movement from Victor would be met with a fury even he couldn't control. Victor's mouth opened, whether to shout, to threaten, or to plead, even he wasn't sure, but no sound came out. Agnes spun the dial, number by number, calling Dr. Harris, the only person she knew who might be willing to come in this storm. As the line connected, her voice cracked. "Doctor, it's Agnes. It's Emily. She's very sick. Please come. She won't make it through the night." The doctor's response was immediate. A promise. He was on his way. George exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours, but his eyes never left Victor, who now stood shaking, fists clenched, jaw grinding in helpless rage. The reality was dawning on him, as dark as the clouds above. For the first time in his life, someone had told him no, and worse, someone had stood against him. Someone and something. Because as Victor's gaze fell back on Diesel, the realization hit him like a stone to the chest. That dog wasn't afraid of him, not anymore, and the worst part, neither was anyone else. The wind roared louder, rattling every window in Blackston Manor, as if the very house itself had grown tired of holding its breath for so many years. Outside, lightning split the sky into violent fractures of light, and thunder rolled through the hills like the sound of judgment. But even the fury of the storm was no match for the chaos unraveling inside those marble walls. Victor paced like a trapped animal, hands gripping his hair, teeth grinding so hard it felt like his jaw might crack. His entire world, built on control, fear, and power, was shattering right in front of him. The servants, the people he had always considered beneath him, dared to defy him. His own guard dog, his prized Doberman, the very symbol of his dominance, now stood between him and the one person he had spent years crushing under his authority, his daughter. His daughter. The word itself tasted bitter, foreign. Victor had spent so long denying any sense of connection to her. To him, Emily was never a daughter. She was a mistake, a reminder of a past he never wanted to face, a past that carried the memory of the only person who had ever dared to walk away from him, her mother. But now, as Diesel kept his body planted firmly over Emily's trembling figure, Victor felt something unfamiliar creeping into his chest. Not guilt, not regret. No, it was something far more terrifying to a man like him: powerlessness. George stood guard near the doorway, wrench in hand, his old hands steady in a way that surprised even him. His entire career had been built on keeping his head down, staying out of things that didn't concern him. But this did concern him. He had watched that little girl suffer for too long, watched her drag her sick body from room to room, scrubbing floors too big for her tiny frame, coughing until her ribs ached, while Victor barked orders as if she were nothing more than furniture. And George had done nothing until tonight. Agnes was still on the phone, her knuckles white as she gripped the receiver, murmuring directions to Dr. Harris. "Yes, come through the south gate. The front road's flooded. Hurry! She's barely breathing." Her voice trembled, her eyes flickering back to Emily over and over, as though sheer willpower could hold the child's fragile life in place until help arrived. Diesel hadn't moved an inch. Rain dripped from his soaked coat, forming puddles on the marble floor. His ears were pinned back, his black eyes never leaving Victor's. His lips curled just enough to show his teeth, a constant warning that one wrong move would be his last. Victor finally snapped. "You're all insane," he shouted, his voice cracking into something unrecognizable. "That's my dog, that's my house, that's my child. I own everything in this place, and you think you can defy me?" He lunged. For a split second, time seemed to freeze. The air in the room compressed, thick as concrete. Diesel's muscles twitched, his paws shifted. His growl rose into a sound so deep, so primal, it felt like it had come from the earth itself. And just as Victor's hand reached for Emily, whether to grab her, to shake her, to do God only knows what, Diesel exploded. The Doberman surged forward with a speed that defied physics. His massive jaws snapped just inches from Victor's wrist, stopping the man mid-lunge. Not biting, not yet, but close enough that the heat of his breath, the flash of his teeth, and the vibrating roar of his snarl made Victor stumble backward in terror, tripping over the edge of the rug and crashing onto the floor. For the first time in his life, Victor Blackstone felt what it was like to be small. Diesel didn't pursue. He didn't have to. His body stood like an iron wall over Emily, his tail stiff, his back arched, every hair on his coat standing on end. His message was clear: come any closer, and you'll regret it. Victor scrambled backward, breathing hard, sweat mixing with the rain that had soaked him when the door burst open earlier. His eyes darted wildly, looking for something, anything, that could shift this back in his favor. But there was nothing, no allies, no servants to back him, no obedience left to command. Agnes dropped the phone back onto its receiver and rushed back to Emily's side, checking her pulse, her forehead, her breathing, all of it getting worse by the minute. "Hold on, baby. Just a little longer." "Hold on!" The wail of an engine echoed in the distance, headlights slicing through the sheets of rain outside. George rushed to the window. "It's the doctor! He's here!" Victor's face twisted. "No! No! I won't allow this! You can't just bring someone into my house without my permission." George spun on him, fire in his eyes. "The only thing you get to allow now is silence." Before Victor could answer, Diesel lunged again, not to bite but to bark, a single deafening, echoing bark that made Victor flinch so hard he hit the wall behind him. That bark wasn't just a sound, it was a declaration. You are no longer in charge here. The front door slammed open as Dr. Harris rushed inside, soaking wet but determined, carrying a leather medical bag. His eyes scanned the scene. Victor on the floor, George standing guard, Agnes kneeling by the unconscious girl, and Diesel, the Doberman planted like a fortress between the child and everything else. "What happened?" the doctor demanded, dropping to his knees beside Agnes. "No time," Agnes gasped. "Fever's through the roof. Her lungs. It's her lungs." The doctor didn't hesitate. "Clear the space. I need towels, blankets, water, now." George bolted for the kitchen. Agnes ran for the linen closet, and Diesel finally allowed himself to lie down, pressing his massive body against Emily's side, his breathing sinking with hers, as if he believed that simply sharing his strength might keep her alive. just a little longer. As the doctor worked, as the storm battered the walls, and as the Doberman refused to leave her side, one thing became clearer than anything else that had ever happened in that house. The power, the control, the fear. It was over. Victor Blackstone had lost. The rain began to soften, tapering from violent sheets into a steady, heavy drizzle that whispered against the broken windows of Blackstone Manor. But inside the house, the storm was far from over. Dr. Harris worked tirelessly over Emily's frail body, his hands moving with the urgency of someone who had seen too many close calls in his career. He set up an oxygen mask, prepared an antibiotic injection, and monitored her erratic pulse as if his own life depended on it. His brow was furrowed in concentration, jaw clenched, every muscle tense, fighting against the clock that seemed determined to take the child from this world. Agnes knelt beside him, holding Emily's tiny, burning hand, whispering gentle words. Through trembling lips, "Stay with us, sweetheart. Stay. You're safe now. Safe." Her thumb brushed over Emily's knuckles, her eyes brimming with tears she refused to let fall. Diesel hadn't moved more than an inch. His large, muscular frame was pressed firmly against Emily's side, his breathing slow but deliberate, as though he believed that by anchoring himself to her, he could somehow keep her tethered to life. His dark eyes never wavered, constantly, scanning every movement around her, his ears flicking at the slightest sound. To anyone watching, it was as though Diesel had appointed himself not just her guardian, but her living shield against a world that had failed her. Victor, meanwhile, sat slumped against the wall. His hands shook, not from cold, but from a kind of tremor he had never experienced before. Powerlessness. His entire life had been built on control, and now, in the house he once ruled like a king, he was nothing but a prisoner of his own choices. His eyes darted from Diesel to Dr. Harris to the front door, weighing his options. But deep down, even he knew there were no options left. The distant sound of sirens began to rise, soft at first, then louder, cutting through the calming rain like knives of reality. Red and blue lights flickered against the wet stone walls. Outside, as two police cars and a Child Protective Services vehicle turned onto the long driveway, their tires crunched over gravel, splashing through puddles that reflected the swirling storm clouds above. George, standing by the window, let out a long breath he hadn't realized he was holding. His grip on the wrench relaxed. "They're here," he said quietly, not to anyone in particular, more to himself. "Thank God, they're finally here." Victor's head snapped toward the sound, his face draining of what little color it had left. "No!" he muttered, scrambling to his feet. No, not like this. You had no right to call them." George turned, his expression iron. "No right. You lost the right the moment you treated that child like she was disposable. You lost it the day you decided to be a tyrant instead of a father." The door flew open with a bang as two officers entered first, their hands resting on their holsters, but weapons untouched. They scanned the room, instantly assessing the situation. An unconscious child hooked to oxygen, an elderly cook holding her hand, a Doberman standing guard, a doctor kneeling over her, a groundskeeper near the window, and a man in a tailored suit soaked in rain, looking very much like a cornered animal. Behind them, a woman in her early 40s stepped inside, wearing the official badge of Child Protective Services around her neck. Her name was Marla Jennings. Her eyes, sharp and seasoned, flicked from Victor to Emily in an instant. One look was all it took. She'd seen enough cases of neglect and abuse in her career to know exactly what this was. Her voice was calm, but carried the undeniable weight of authority. "Victor Blackstone," she asked, already pulling a folder from her briefcase. "My name is Marla Jennings with CPS. We received multiple reports of child endangerment, neglect, and abuse in this residence. I'm here to investigate the welfare of your daughter." Victor's mouth opened, searching desperately for the arrogance that had always served him like armor, but there was nothing left, no script to follow. No excuse strong enough to explain why his 7-year-old daughter was lying unconscious on the floor, guarded by a Doberman and surrounded by people who clearly cared more about her life than he ever had. Marla's eyes narrowed. "Step aside, sir," she ordered, already moving toward Emily without waiting for permission. Victor flinched but didn't move fast enough. One of the officers placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "Sir, you need to stand back. Now." Dr. Harris looked up, briefly relief flashing in his eyes as Marla knelt beside him. "She's got severe pneumonia," he explained quickly. "Advanced, high fever, signs of malnutrition. I've stabilized her for now, but she needs to be hospitalized immediately." Marla nodded, her face hardening. "Is she conscious?" "Barely. Fading in and out." Marla reached out, brushing a damp strand of hair from Emily's face. Her voice softened instantly. "Sweetheart, can you hear me? You're safe now. My name is Marla. We're going to take care of you, okay?" Emily stirred weakly, her eyes fluttering open for just a brief second, long enough to whisper one word. "Diesel." The Doberman, hearing his name, let out a gentle whine, pressing his snout against her hand. For everyone in that room, that single word was more powerful than any accusation, any police report, any legal document. It was a testimony, a declaration of who had truly protected her when no one else did. Marla stood, turning sharply toward Victor. Her voice, though steady, was cold as steel. "Mr. Blackstone, effective immediately, your parental rights are being suspended pending a full investigation. Officers, remove him from the premises." "No, you can't do this. You can't," Victor shouted, struggling as the officers grabbed his arms, forcing them behind his back. "Oh, yes, we can," the officer replied flatly, snapping on the cuffs. "And we are." As Victor was dragged toward the door, his eyes darted to Diesel one last time, the very symbol of obedience, of control, of power that he had once commanded. But now those dark, intelligent eyes stared back with nothing but contempt. No fear, no submission, only loyalty. Loyalty given to someone who deserved it. To Emily. Victor screamed curses as the door slammed behind him, his voice fading into the storm as the officers dragged him down the steps and into the waiting squad car. Inside, Diesel remained where he was, head resting gently against Emily's chest, rising and falling with each shallow breath. As the paramedics arrived with a stretcher, preparing to transfer her safely to the ambulance, Diesel didn't move until he was sure, absolutely sure, that wherever she was going, he was going too. The soft hum of the ambulance filled the night as it pulled away from Blackstone Manor, its red and blue lights cutting through the foggy drizzle that still lingered after the storm. Inside the vehicle, Emily lay bundled in warm blankets, an oxygen mask gently secured over her face. Her skin was still pale, her breathing shallow, but the fever was breaking. Slowly, steadily, her small hands clutched the soft ear of the one constant presence in her life, Diesel, who refused to leave her side even for a second. The paramedics had argued at first, citing safety policies, but one look at Diesel's unwavering eyes and the way Emily's fragile fingers curled around his collar made it clear that separating them wasn't just unthinkable. It was impossible. Diesel sat calmly by her stretcher, his big body wedged between her and the metal wall, as though shielding her from every bump in the road, every shadow, every reminder of the life she was finally leaving behind. At the hospital, a team of doctors and nurses took over immediately. Dr. Harris stayed, overseeing her care while coordinating with specialists. He moved with quiet urgency, guiding the team, ensuring every step was handled with precision. Oxygen levels checked, antibiotics administered, IV fluid started. For the first time in days, there was hope. Real hope. Marla, from Child Protective Services, stood nearby, filling out paperwork. Her sharp, no-nonsense professionalism softened every time she glanced toward Emily's room. The little girl had fought harder than anyone ever should have to. And now, it was their turn to fight. For her, Diesel lay curled beside Emily's hospital bed, his massive frame barely fitting in the space, but he refused to be anywhere else. Every time a nurse entered, Diesel's head would lift, his dark eyes following their every move, only relaxing when he was sure no harm would come to her. As dawn began to break, soft rays of sunlight filtered through the hospital window, painting the sterile white walls in gentle gold. For the first time in as long as anyone could remember, Emily opened her eyes fully. She blinked, disoriented, then slowly turned her head toward the familiar sound of a soft whine. Diesel. Her tiny, cracked lips formed a weak smile as she reached out a trembling hand to stroke his head. His tail thumped quietly against the floor, a rhythmic reminder that no matter how much the world had failed her before, she was never truly alone. "Hey, little one," came a voice from the doorway. It was Claire, Dr. Harris's daughter, a kind-faced woman in her late 20s, with gentle eyes that held no pity, only warmth. Claire stepped inside, carrying a tray with warm oatmeal, sliced fruit, and a small carton of apple juice. "Look what I've got for you," she said with a soft grin. "Think you're strong enough to try a little?" Emily nodded, barely. But the simple act of saying yes felt like lifting a mountain. As Claire settled the tray onto the table, Dr. Harris joined her, folding his arms and looking down at Emily with a smile that was both relieved and proud. "You gave us quite a scare," he said, crouching to meet her eye level. "But you're one tough little girl." Emily opened her mouth, her voice weak but clear. Do I have to go back?" Silence filled the room for a moment. Heavy, meaningful, before Marla stepped in, her face gentler than Emily had seen it before. "No, sweetheart," she said firmly. "You are never going back. Not ever." Tears welled in Emily's eyes. Not from sadness, but from something foreign, something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Safety. Her tiny hand gripped Diesel's collar tighter, as if confirming that it wasn't a dream. Marla continued, her voice steady. "You'll be staying with Dr. Harris and Claire for now. And if you want, we can talk about making it permanent. About finding a real family, one that keeps you safe, one that loves you." Emily turned her gaze toward Claire, whose smile grew even softer, her eyes shining. "We would love that, Emily," Claire said, taking her hand gently. "If you want, we'd love to be your family." The little girl's lips quivered, her eyes flicking to Diesel as if to ask whether it was real, whether it was safe to believe. Diesel responded with a gentle nudge of his nose, followed by a warm, low chuff, his way of saying what words never could. Outside the hospital room, the world continued, but inside, something extraordinary had happened. Days passed, and Emily grew stronger. Her color returned, her appetite came back. Her laughter, quiet at first, began to echo softly through the hospital halls. Diesel became something of a local celebrity. Nurses brought him treats, doctors petted him between rounds. And every patient who saw the big Doberman lying by the little girl's side couldn't help but smile. As the weeks unfolded, the court ruled decisively. Victor Blackston was stripped of all parental rights, his assets frozen pending multiple investigations, not just for child abuse, but for financial crimes and worker exploitation. The grand mansion of Blackstone, once a symbol of arrogance and cruelty, stood empty, its walls stripped of power. A new owner would eventually take it, but its darkest chapter had come to an end. Emily never returned to that house. She never had to. Instead, she moved into a warm home with Claire and Dr. Harris, a house with laughter, with books, with bedtime stories. A house where chores meant feeding Diesel or helping water the garden, not scrubbing marble floors until her hands bled. A house where birthdays were celebrated, where hugs were free, and where no one ever made her feel small. Diesel, of course, came with her. No one even questioned it. He wasn't just a dog. He was her guardian, her protector, her family. The bond between them was unbreakable, forged in the fire of survival and tempered by unconditional love. One crisp spring morning, as they sat together in the backyard, watching Diesel chase butterflies, Claire leaned over and asked softly, "Emily, do you know what today is?" The little girl shook her head, smiling. Claire pulled out a small folder. Adoption papers. It's the day we officially become a family. Emily's eyes filled with tears, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming joy of something she never dared to dream of. She wrapped her arms around Claire, burying her face into her chest, while Diesel jumped up, barking happily as if he understood every word. As they hugged, the wind blew softly through the trees, carrying away the last echoes of the past, the shadows, the pain, the fear, leaving behind only the warmth of a new beginning. For the first time in her life, Emily knew exactly what home felt like. Not a place, not a mansion, but people. And a Doberman who had saved her life in every way that mattered.